Attention, you are now entering the debarkation area. No talking, no smoking.
Welcome to Escape from New York, the official story of the film. This series will look behind the scenes of the forthcoming book that celebrates the making of the movie from 1981.
S.D. Pliskin. He robbed the Federal Reserve Depository. Life sentence, New York Maximum Security Penitentiary.
I'm filmmaker and author John Walsh, and I'll take you on a journey through a dystopian future to discover how John Carpenter's vision has become the ultimate cult film of the last 40 years.
Get a new president.
We're still at war, Pliskin.
I will be speaking with the cast, the crew, and fans of the film, and giving you a unique insight into the making of the book.
You're Snake Plissken, ain't you?
Snake Plissken, Duke. The man sent him in here. Something's going down. We need him.
I will reveal details of upcoming events, and there will be a chance to win copies of the book too.
I can't hear you.
You are the Duke of New York. You're a number one.
Well, thank you so much for doing this again. You know, it's good of you to contribute to my book and to chat to me as well about your wonderful artwork. I sent you through a bunch of some of the posters that are going to be in the book, obviously alongside your excellent artwork.
Yeah,
I wondered if you had a chance to have a look at some of those.
I do like the Escape from New York posters. It's funny that they're, on the whole, completely inaccurate to the film.
They are so crazy. I mean, compared to sort of Flash Gordon, where it was quite clear brief, the posters are of a similar kind of, not a similar style, but they certainly have a similar kind of energy. These are like, who was commissioning this? I mean, and I got the stories behind virtually every single one of them. And there's a couple of surprise ones, some that have never been seen before as well, which is... has become my little forte, digging out the stuff that nobody else found.
I love that sort of thing.
Maybe if we kick off with Barry Jackson, because Barry was working on the animated Lord of the Rings with Ralph Bakshi when he got this job to do the main, what we'd consider, I think, Matt, the main poster. Would you say so?
I'd say it's the key art. It's kind of like the promise of the film is definitely summed up in that one, and it's the one that you see the most on VHS and album covers and stuff. So yeah, that's definitely what I would consider the key art.
But the main US one sheet that wasn't it? So
yeah,
for Europe we had something different, didn't we? But you were saying earlier that about things not being accurate or suggesting more in the film than there was, because this is a bit cheeky, isn't it, with the representation here?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got the Statue of Liberty head broken, and it's kind of, I guess it's a bit of a Planet of the Apes sort of. Instantly, you know that it's going to be a dystopian future, 1997. But in the film, the Statue of Liberty is not smashed up; it's just still standing normal. So, I guess they were just like wanting to make it look even more exciting than the film actually was, because it's quite a slow burn film. It's not like an action-packed. It's not like what you would consider like a modern blockbuster at all. It's a very slow burn, dramatic film. So
it is, isn't it? And J.J. Abrams is a big fan of Escape from New York, and people say that's why in Cloverfield he had that sequence of the.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Well, it does. It does. It's very similar. Well, how did it get there though? Because obviously the Statue of Liberty is on an island.
Yeah, I think in Cloverfield that kind
it's
of
a big monster there, but in Escape from New York.
Well, that's maybe artistic license, but as we go through, there are some which are like, well, were they watching another film? Some posters were made before the film was actually shot. So who have you got up next? I'll let you choose the order on this.
We'll go for the Bill Garland poster, which is a much more generic, cool Snake Plissken It's got looks like he shot down some people. I mean, this is very much a sort of B-movie indie film, really, isn't it? Escape from New York. So it's got a much more handmade approach to it all, and it's not streamlined as what I guess people are used to nowadays. But I quite like that about the posters for the film. They've got a nice charm to them because, like you say, I don't think there was a brief so much as other than it's in New York. This is our main guy. Have at it, and then they just got a few photos, and then just the artist went crazy. So I quite like that about those posters.
So Avco Embassy, who were kind of a big indie company, put the money together to make John Carpenter's biggest budget film, $6 million.
Yeah.
And they spent almost as much on the advertising and marketing. So they went down to all of the leading advertising people and got their best artists to kind of render things up. But of course, the brief was really quite broad. And also, they didn't really want to reveal too much about what the film was. And in some cases, weren't even told the title or that it was the new John Carpenter film.
Right.
Such was the secrecy around the project. But when I saw the Bill Garland, I thought, oh, is that for the novelization? Because it has a kind of a look and feel of an Alan Dean Foster novel, doesn't it?
It does. It's not like a sort of what you would consider like a traditional movie poster style piece of artwork. But again, I think that makes it stick out. So I really do like that one.
What have you got next?
The Japanese one, I think, is a good one to talk about. I've always liked Japanese posters because they tend to, I mean, this has got a painting of the Statue of Liberty, which is pretty cool, but they tend to be a bit more graphic, and then they use a lot of stills from the film on Japanese film posters, I've noticed, and so you get a completely different vibe, obviously, from the other sort of marketing. But I like this one with the barbed wire on the Statue of Liberty because it sort of keys you in to it being a prison without even, you don't need to speak Japanese to know kind of what the film is going to be.
Yeah, it's much more sort of photo montage. It reminds me of the UK release for Blade Runner. Had quite a photo montage in 1982, and it's not a favourite amongst most people. If it's the first one you've seen, which was the photo montage, it had quite a Japanese feel about it. But I think they were ahead of the game, I think, in a way, Matt, weren't they? Because they were doing photo montage when Hollywood was still doing traditional sort of paintings.
Oh yeah, but it's kind of like I like that it's just sort of stills from the film, so you just get a general sort of vibe of what's gonna happen. So it's almost more like a video case.
Almost looks like a pirate version of the film if someone was trying to pirate it and do something that they shouldn't. What's next?
One I've never seen before, Kim Passy poster.
Oh yeah, the Through the Keyhole one. That's quite another bizarre one. Again, from the world of advertising and graphic design at the time. This wouldn't look out of place, I guess, in a magazine, in a kind of a Sports Illustrated magazine, especially if you're advertising something like a watch. So it does seem to be very heavily chromed, doesn't it, around the edges?
He's melting through the keyhole, so I guess that's showing he's breaking out. It's a really interesting one. It's got that cool sort of 80s, even though this is very early 80s, this film, that, you know, the way they used to do the chrome airbrushing. I really like that.
If you got Paul Chadwick up next.
Wow, okay. That's got that crazy depth of field going on, the perspective on the gun.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
It's got kind of a Conan vibe because trying to make the weapon into a sword, I guess. He was based in Los Angeles, so I don't know if there's a different kind of house style between East and West Coast at the time. But
so this was done in 1980.
1980, yes.
Yeah, cool.
Or it might have been as late as sort of January, February 81. I think the film came out July 81. But none of the artists were kind of in touch with each other or knew who was doing what. So it was quite an odd approach because a lot of money was spent and, dare I say, as a producer, wasted on beautiful art that would never get to be seen. I mean, it's almost as if everyone was auditioning for what was going to be the final version. And incidentally, we opened with Barry E. Jackson. He wasn't going to be the final version. They already had a finalist in place when he
Oh, really?
blew everyone out of the water. So when you find that one, I'll tell you which one it is when we come to
Okay,
it.
interesting. So another one is an artist that I like, I'm a big fan of, is Renato Cicero one,
Yes.
the Italian one.
Yes.
I love the title, but also he's a really good poster artist. I think he did the UK Flash Gordon artwork as well.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've always liked his style because that's larger than life, and that's sort of taking elements from the Barry Jackson one, like the Statue of Liberty and stuff, but you've got that big Snake Plissken. It's just a really good one.
It's given him big arms, though. I think. Kurt Russell would be well pleased with that because
he did a lot of posters like that, like sort of Stallone films and stuff, didn't he? So there's kind of like that real action feel to that one.
And the sort of the dominance of the weapon and front and center. So the star of the film here really is front and center. And as we kind of go back and look at the Barry Jackson again, it's kind of like, you know, Kurt Russell and Donald Pleasence are tiny in the shot. You wouldn't know they're in the film from that poster. So quite an unusual take to have a poster that doesn't really feature the main characters or actors.
Yeah, well, I quite like that way. I do that a lot with my own artwork, where it's kind of more about the environment and the setting. And obviously with it being Escape from New York, Kurt Russell wasn't a huge star at the time because he was still seen as a bit of a sort of Disney person, wasn't he?
That's right.
And this was him. This was him sort of breaking away from that, along with Elvis, I guess. So it was less about the stars because Donald Pleasence wasn't a huge star either, and it's an early film where they were more about the. Well, it's kind of similar to like a disaster film, like a Towering Inferno type thing, where it's more about the situation than the big stars. So that I guess that's why they went that way with it.
You're looking at the Rene. I always wonder how to pronounce that. Rene.
The UK quad.
Yeah, the French guy, Rene Parassi. That's the one I first saw because
I remember this one.
And I love it. And I'm even wearing it now as a t-shirt. And I always thought it was UK, but it's French. It's French in origin. So it's French artists who created that. And we have the French version in the book as well as this beautiful version of the English one. Mm-hmm. And it's a really nice alternative. And I think it runs, for me, a very close second to Barry's because it has Snake at the center. It has the city of New York. And I just think he's made a good use of the frame there, Matt. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's a really good composition, this one, because it's kind of like a bullet composition. So you've got Snake bang in the middle and then the things happening around. And again, it tells the story of it sort of that it's going to be Manhattan and there's going to be action of some kind. It less so than the Barry one. It doesn't have the sort of feel of sort of the apocalyptic and then the escape, because obviously it looks like they're attacking New York, the helicopters. So it's kind of doesn't quite tell the story as good as the Barry Jackson one, which is probably why they like that one more. I think it's important for posters to sort of tell a bit of the story as well, and that one does really well. I think that's why it's a classic poster, because it sums it up.
Now, Richard Hescox, I think you've probably got next in your order. Is that right? Now, here we go, because this was created before the film started shooting. So it's like a pre-release poster. Variety often used to have announcement advertisements where it's now announcing principal photography on a picture. Well, this was when the film had been agreed, but no one had been cast. But there was a suggestion of who was going to be cast. And that's why Richard did this image of Charles Bronson.
Charles Bronson, I was going to say, it's definitely not Kurt Russell. Right.
So that's what the studio wanted that, because Death Wish had been a big success.
Yeah.
Avco Embassy said, look, we want to do something. We want to be in the Charles Bronson business. And you could imagine him in that role, not to take away from Kurt Russell. You could imagine Charles Bronson at that time. He could do that.
Yeah.
It would have been a very different film, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, what I like about it is the way Kurt Russell plays it, kind of like a bit like Clint Eastwood. So like that sort of stoic, and he's kind of like really cool through the film. So I don't think Charles Bronson would have played it that way. So it might have become a bit more of a straightforward action film. And I've always liked that about Escape from New York, that Kurt Russell isn't like a big, tough guy, really. So it's kind of more about his smarts. Probably a bit younger as well. Charles Bronson's probably older, right? So there's that element as well.
And the real reason that John Carpenter didn't want Charles Bronson, other than he thought Kurt Russell would be great at it, was because he'd worked with Kurt Russell on Elvis and it'd been a big success.
Yeah.
It'd been Emmy nominated and had a theatrical release in Europe. But he thought that the thing that happened to the director of Spartacus could happen to him on this picture. So, of course, John Carpenter wrote Escape from New York. It's very much his picture. On Spartacus, the director was replaced when Kirk Douglas decided things weren't going the way they should. And Kirk Douglas got in a friend of his, Stanley Kubrick, thinking he'd have a much easier time with Stanley Kubrick. Of course, Stanley Kubrick doesn't need to bow down to anyone. And the film was brilliant, but he gave Douglas, a pretty kind of tough ride. And, John Carpenter thought that if Charles Bronson came in, who knows, his star power might unseat him from the director's chair. And I was quite surprised by that revelation. We don't think of that now, but of course, John was very young at the time. And so you have to have these things in mind, the politics of who's in charge on set.
And they had a good working relationship from Elvis already, I guess, him and Kurt Russell. So they knew how to work with him. And then they worked together again 2 more times. So I guess it definitely was a mutual respect that they've got for each other.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Cool. What's next?
Stan Watts.
That is another US one.
It's the US one, and it was the one that they intended to go theatrically.
Okay.
They booked it in. I think they even done a large print run for theatres. So this was the one they were going to definitely go with.
Right.
And I'm, no disrespect to Stan Watts, because it's good work. It is surprising. I'm surprised by that.
Again, it's the Statue of Liberty. So obviously that there was something where people, the artists thought New York Statue of Liberty. So, but it's got like an old school photo strip with the characters. So it's much more of the time. It feels more 70s, whereas the Barry Jackson one is quite fresh and more 80s in vibes. So I can see why they would go with that, because this one's much more like a traditional sort of 70s poster.
You mentioned like disaster films. It has those kind of enhanced portraits, and I have all the individual elements in the book of the individual thumbnail cameos. And you can see how they've been painted, almost a turn of the century style, airbrushed. And this is what happened on the airport movies and the Poseidon Adventure.
Yeah.
You'd have all of your stars of the day with
like
tiny little cameos.
Yeah,
often very airbrushed. So you couldn't hardly recognize them.
So I can see where the marketing or the artist was going with that, because they were thinking those other films. But obviously Barry Jackson came in with something a lot more fresh and like more complete as a self-contained image, because you could take off the text from that Barry Jackson one and it would still be a really good, exciting image. So yeah, I can see why they did that. I've got a Drew Struzan one. I didn't know Drew Struzan did something in 2003, it says.
So this is really unusual. So I was in touch with Drew, and I'd heard that he did work on some Escape from New York artwork, and it was for a kind of a DVD, special DVD release. It was never issued. So I said to him,
right.
What have you got and what can we have? And long story short, he had lots of pieces. He's given me everything. So there's about 5 or 6 pieces now in the book for the very first time. And of course, Drew had worked on John Carpenter's The Thing and Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
So he would have been a perfect fit to have done something at the time, but they hadn't got together at that point, and it was very early on for Drew, so it wouldn't have been something he would have been pitching for. But great to see stuff in here. I have a colour piece as well of Snake Plissken, where he's daubed in a kind of a red light when he's inside the glider.
Oh yeah.
But unusual.
Cool.
I'm glad you were pleasantly surprised by that.
No, well, Drew Struzan's like the best at likeness of any poster artist, I'd say. because this is sort of like a sketch that I'm looking at, and it's really, when you look close, it's done really quite roughly, but how coherent it is and how you can just the likenesses are spot on, like compared to the airbrushed faces on the on that other poster we were just looking at.
On the
the
Stan
likenesses are so much better, but that's just Drew Struzan's like forte is amazing likenesses. I don't know, it makes me a little bit sad because I wish I could draw that good.
Well,
Is that all of them? The Polish one, yeah.
Locally, artists and distributors can do their own artwork.
Yeah.
And it's odd not to go with the established art that's come from America or Europe. And it always surprises me that local distributors tend to spend extra money on rebranding the brand, as it were. Doesn't happen these days so much, though.
No, nowadays you go as far as maybe localization, where you'll do just change it to the local language, but it'll be the same artwork. So that's about as far as it goes, really.
So when you came to do yours, Matt, for Escape from New York, for the beautiful 4K remaster that was done a couple of years ago, what were your did you try not to look at too many of the other posters? Because obviously you had the Barry Jackson and the UK version in mind, but did you research all the posters, or did you try and avoid all of that?
I already knew quite a few of them already anyway. Because it was going to be for the UK, I definitely looked at the quad, because, and also that's kind of like, me being English, I like quad poster art as well. I know that I consciously avoided doing like an angle, a Dutch angle, like on the Barry Jackson one, because I thought I can't really top that. And then the main thing really was I kind of like wanted to bring in some more accuracy to the film, because we were saying, a lot of the artwork at the time, they hadn't seen the film, or it didn't seem to really matter particularly to the people marketing the film what was actually going on in the film. So I wanted to do more of that and like bring in the sort of computer graphics, Statue of Liberty and stuff from the opening. And then obviously I remember the studio obviously wanted Kurt Russell on there, so we put him on pretty big, which kind of harks back to the Italian one. So it's kind of like cherry picking stuff, and then trying to put my own spin on it and try and make it a kind of, I guess, a little bit modern, but I also like to sort of give stuff a tinge of the sort of retro feel with the layout and stuff. So that was the thinking on it, to try and almost make it look like it could have come out back then. Some more of an illustrated poster instead of using photographs and stuff. Yeah.
And so, because you've worked with Studio and Canal, of course, on your fantastic Flash Gordon reissue as well, the 1980 Flash Gordon. So, did they have much of a brief? You said about having Kurt Russell front and centre. Did the boys and girls down at Studio Canal say, "Look, these are what we do want, don't want"? Was there any kind of steer?
Yeah, there was that. Obviously, you want Kurt Russell. It was based off of some artwork that I had already done before, and that was what got them to hire me. But I had to sort of repurpose it all. I remember there was sort of a little bit of talk about the towers, whether we should have them on or not, because of September 11th, obviously. And I think we just decided it's true to the film to have them, and so there's a version somewhere without them, and it didn't feel right. So we've got the towers on there because it just seems like integral to the film. So that was, I think, it was an easy one to do, really. Flash Gordon was a bigger ask because there was a lot more going on with that artwork. So yeah.
And it's a busy film. Flash Gordon is kind of lots of people and
crazy
scenes, and it's kind of a real sort of it was a real space opera, effectively, isn't it? This is a real small scale film that only has a handful of players and really one setting, which is mostly so dark it's very hard to see. So I suppose it's hard to kind of capture that in a single poster. Did you have a favorite scene or moment in the film, or was it just an overall feel you went for?
A general feel, because it's that sort of John Carpenter pared back. He holds back with the camera and he just lets things sort of unfold in his films. So it was kind of like giving that a sense of scale. I always really liked the cut when it goes up, and then up the wall, and you see the guard, and then you've got Manhattan, and it's got a really good sound cue, and the helicopter goes over. So I wanted that. So I sort of did that in the comp as well. So, and then with it being landscape, you can do a little bit more of that sort of spaced out and have some more elements in it. It's difficult with John Carpenter stuff because, like you say, it's very pared back. His style, very minimalist. So, I mean, I could have almost wanted to just do Snake Plissken sat on the chair, because there's that bit in the film where he just sits on the chair for a bit because he doesn't sort of know what to do next. It's things like that. There's weird little things in John Carpenter movies. So, yeah.
He kind of has that thought in his head. Every time I see that scene, I'm always thinking he's thinking like, I don't know who's going to be cleaning this up because it's not me. Because you have that look on your face, like you've had a party at your house, everyone's gone home, and you're sat there thinking, who's cleaning all this up? Because it was in the right states. I mean, they got the St. Louis streets and really marvelously trashed them up.
The plane is like the real amazing sort of set. I guess they got a real plane and then made it look like it had crashed, but that's like a real good bit of scenery for the film. I've always thought that whole sequence.
Now, my book's going to be covering obviously the making of the film, which covers all the things we've talked about, but we're going to go into some of the deleted scenes. I found images, and we've got some amazing photography of the boys down at New World, Roger Corman's company, who did the FX, so all of the model work, and lots of behind the scenes stuff there. And that really was done in a rudimentary way with cardboard boxes and black painted floors. So I'm hoping that my book doesn't ruin the magic for people. What are you hoping that, Matt, you might find out? Because you have my Flash Gordon book as well.
I'd like to see some of the sort of costume and stuff like that, because I do know a little bit about special effects. Like, one thing I always really liked was how they did the water around Manhattan. They just varnished the floor, didn't they? Or painted it, and it was just a concrete floor. And then because it's dark and shiny, it just looks like water. I thought that was brilliant.
It's the escape button.
And then they couldn't afford CG, could they? So it was all just done in camera. But yeah, no, like costume and like maybe like how they did some of his gear, because he's got really cool gear. There's like that cool bit with all of his stuff laid out on the table. Always like that bit. So
yeah, we've got that, and then we've got some exclusive stuff from the Oscars archive as well. So the Margaret Herrick Museum, which is part of the Oscars archive, has given me access to the designs that were created for the picture. So cool. It's great, because people like yourself who have done deep research and know the story backwards, you don't want people to flick through and think, I've seen that or I know that. It needs to be more than that, because if you're asking people to shell out for a book, there's got to be a reason. It's got to be more than a kind of an inlay booklet. It needs really to stand on its own 2 feet, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I guess people know like lots of the sort of history of it, and they know that like I don't know if they do, but I mean, I read it like that James Cameron worked on it and did some matte painting and all this sort of stuff. But to maybe see some of those, because I've only ever seen maybe one photograph of a matte painting being done, and it's got a few matte paintings in it and the model work and all that sort of stuff. So, because I don't think there's very much sort of behind the scenes footage, like when they do a making of and things like that.
No, there's not. I'll see if I can find
some photos would be good. It's kind of like there was a while back they put out a load of photos from behind the scenes of Blade Runner, like the model shop, and that was amazing when they all hit the net. So some of that sort of stuff is what I'm always interested in.
I'll see if I can find you something really exclusive to show you, because the fascinating thing about Escape from New York, it's such a small film and had such a small FX budget that it was great to try and get things in that hadn't really been seen before. Yeah, so there is, you can see it, Matt.
Oh, right, okay.
So
it's the helicopter shot, yeah.
Helicopter shot. The matte painting is part of that. There's back winding that's done in the camera, and so it's There is some pretty decent
that's
stuff
cool.
in there, and I was so excited to find them because
Also, I noticed to see the rocks are, because I've always wondered that actually, because the light comes up from the helicopter and it shines quite realistically on the rocks, and they're a little foreground miniature.
that's right. Yeah, and I
in
think
front of it. Oh, that's cool.
I think though the lamp from the helicopter was a second pass, so everything was rewound again, and the lamp went through as a second pass, but it did hit the rocks, so it was it's what people want to see, isn't it? You want to see
Definitely.
proper behind the scenes stuff, because this is the big difficulty I have with making these books is there's shots of the actors sat having a cigarette maybe or a coffee on their actor's chair or their director's chair. But that's not really the shots we would take if we were there with a camera and went back in time. We'd be taking the shots of the technicians hanging things from wires. So I'm really pleased that on a film that's much smaller than Flash Gordon that we found, I think, as good a amount of content.
Yeah,
and
that's really exciting. Yeah.
And Joe Alves, the production designer, he had a fairly decent archive, but the team that worked down at the special effects at New World, they had a better one. So
Right,
of Joe Alves' own work. So they had originals. So they're in there for the very first time. So I'm hopeful and excited that between that and the deleted scenes, the bank robbery stuff we go into in more detail, we have new screenshots and everything else.
Yeah.
And stuff from Alan Howarth, the composer, stories about the music, and there was an Ennio Morricone story he told me. And so I'm hoping that when people see the book and read it, they'll go and watch the film again. I mean, I think that's the plan down at Studio Canal. They want one thing to rub the hand of the other.
It worked with the Flash Gordon book. The Flash Gordon book had loads of stuff in it. I liked all the stuff on the costumes and the swords and stuff like that in that book. That was really interesting to read about.
Thanks. Yeah,
there was definitely stuff that I didn't know in there. So I'm assuming they'll be the same with this one.
I hope so. It's a high bar I've set with that last book, and it's thanks to the fans who sorted me out with most of those pictures.
Yeah.
Because sadly, Studio Canal, who weren't in charge of the film in the 1980s, they only had a few pictures. So as in the case of Escape from New York, I've had to find some extras because you can't ask people to pay to see the same things again. You want them to see something new and exciting.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And your artwork features as well, Matt, of course, in the poster section. I didn't offer up your posters because they're in there.
No.
And I'm very grateful you've allowed us to pop those into the book because it makes it complete.
Cool.
And an exciting time. So before I let you go, I'll ask you just one final question. Do you have a favorite scene, moment, or line in the film that always stands out for you? I'll share you mine if you share me yours.
I like the wrestling sort of fighting scene because it's one of the few scenes in the film that's like lit quite brightly, and I just love the change in pace, and then the fight with that big giant. I think he's a real wrestler. That I really like that because it's kind of like proto Mad Max type stuff. So yeah.
Ox Baker, yeah, fabulous. And we've done a new interview with Dean Cundy where he talks all about how the problems with lighting the picture and everything. My favorite line, I think, if it's not my favorite scene as well, is when the Duke of New York is berating the President of the United States that he can't hear him. I can't hear you.
What did I teach you?
You are the Duke of New York. You're a number one.
And you are the Duke of New York. You are a number one. And of course, when he gets to the end and shoots him with a machine gun, he has that in mind. He cannot stop pumping lead into poor old Isaac Hayes, who everyone absolutely adored. He was a wonderful man and used to kind of sing between takes for people to keep them cooled down in the hot nights that they were filming. So that's fantastic. It's great that you came on to share your memories and to give us your expert eye on the posters, Matt.
Yeah,
thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah.
And in another 40 years' time, we'll be back for the 80th anniversary, I think.
Hopefully.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Matt.
Okay, cheers. Thank you.
Copyright in Escape from New York, the official story of the film, is owned by John Walsh and Titan Books Limited, under license from Studio Canal. This recording may not be reproduced in whole or in part without written permission from us. The views expressed within these podcasts do not necessarily reflect those of the associated companies or its employees. For further terms and conditions, please contact us via our Facebook page Escape from New York, the official story of the film.